So welcome to New York Buddha Dharma. Let's bow in. And we'll meditate for about 25 minutes or so. So we start by taking a good posture. Which basically means having a straight spine. That's the most important aspect of posture. You want to have a nice straight spine wherever you're sitting, in a chair, on a cushion. You can bring your shoulders back a little bit if you like, and your head back on your shoulders. Good straight spine, we call it having good head and shoulders. It's an uplifted posture, uplifts the spirit as well as the body. If you're sitting in a chair, you would like your feet to be flat on the floor or flat on something if necessary. And if you're either in a chair or on the cushion, you would like your hips to be at the same level as or higher than your knees, ideally. Just creates less tension in the body. Check your body for tension. Your lower belly, if you find any tension there, relax it. Your back, middle, upper, neck, shoulders, your face. Take a deep breath and exhale. When you exhale, you're sort of breathing yourself out into the space. And here you are. Here we are. Your hands can be very simply palms down on the thighs, or any other posture you like. Elbows by your hips. We're practicing Vipassana meditation, which is in keeping with the subject matter that we've been going through. It's awareness meditation. So you meditate with your eyes open, because we're training in awareness. Your gaze is relaxed without being swimmy, just natural. And you can aim your eyes either down at a 45-degree angle or at the horizontal, or for that matter in any direction you like, but the main idea is to keep them focused, aimed in the one direction. When our minds wander, the eyes tend to wander, and vice versa. So it helps a bit to pick a spot and keep your eyes aimed in that direction. And now bringing your mind into this space, this room, this present moment. That's what we call this space. The present moment. It's called the Alaya. It's called the Dharma Dhatu. In this space, which is both physical and temporal, it's now. The future and the past are just fictions. And we let go of all of our thoughts of the past and the future, with all their tension and anxiety. And we just rest our minds here in this space, this room, right now. And the six knowables arise and pass away in the moment. These are the objects of sight, sounds, smells, tastes, bodily sensations, touches, and mental events, all arising and passing away instantaneously in the present moment, in this space. We rest here. It's effortless, really. Resting in this space is perfect meditation. But because of our habits, dreams will arise and take our attention away. And so to help with that, to help ground us and bring us back from dream, we might, if you wish, up to you, work with the breath. And if you do, we work with the out breath. You identify with the out breath. The breath comes up in your body. It exits through the nostrils or the lips. You can feel it as it does. And it goes out into the space, a line as it goes, dissolving as it goes. And at the end of the out breath, it's completely dissolved, and you with it, into this space, now, here, with all of the appearances arising and passing away. So the breath comes up. You can feel it as it exits. And then it goes out. You visualize it going out and dissolving like a line drawn on water, dissolving as it goes. And at the end of the out breath, there's just this. Out breath, dissolve, let go. So, whatever you might be thinking, just see it. Don't have to do anything with it. Certainly don't try to get rid of it. You just see it. And you're already back in awareness. And you just rest here, watching your thoughts and whatever of the five senses arise and present themselves to you. And if you wish, you follow the out breath. It rises up. You can feel it as it leaves your nostrils or your lips. And you visualize it going out into the space, dissolving as it goes. And at the end of the out breath, you just completely let go. Out breath, dissolve, gap. So we'll take a 5-minute break and then resume for the talk and discussion. Hello, Roberta. Long time. I know.
I'm here in the mornings.
Oh, you are. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, Cliff. Good to see you, everybody. Okay, well, let's start. And start with a gong and a bow. Welcome, everyone, to New York Buddha Dharma. Virtual. We are in the ozone, like so much of our lives these days, huh? I wanted to ask you before we start on tonight's topic. There's a class that meets tomorrow as well at around 7 o'clock, but they prefer to have a longer time to sit. And we start at 6:30. People can join or not at any time during the next hour. And then the lecture, we practice till 7:30, sitting with a 10-minute walk in the middle. And we also do Tonglen, which is compassion practice. And then we break again at 7:30 and start the talk at 7:35. And I'm wondering if there are any people here who would like to have a longer group sit for New York Buddha Dharma, start at 6:30 instead of 7. And nope, one person. 2 people. That's enough. We'll do it. We'll all sit with you, and we'll start at 6:30. And anybody can come in. You can come at any time. Join in. 6:35, 6:40, 7:25, and but we'll be sitting. It'll be good. So, also, we're going through a syllabus of readings, and these readings were distributed in PDF form to anybody who asked, wanted them. This is the last class in that syllabus. Next week, we start on the next semester, as it were. And if you would like that syllabus, I'll be happy to send it to you. Would you just put your email in chat? You know, does anyone who doesn't know how to do that? To put your email in the chat function here. Because I'll explain it if you do. And if you put your email in the chat, then in a day or two, you will receive the PDF of the next 12 weeks. And these are the readings with the schedule. Okay. And by the way, for those of you who are also coming to the Tuesday class, and there are a few people here who do, this is the Tuesday class that you will, we're just behind, Monday is behind Tuesday. So you might be seeing the same readings twice if you were already in the Tuesday class and have done them. Fair warning. So tonight, the topic is really meditation. The title was Meditation, Renunciation, Daring, and Appreciation. And it's based on 2 chapters from 2 different books. I had forgotten how good Meditation in Action was. Meditation in Action was Trungpa Rinpoche's first book. It was made from his talks that he gave in England, and it was published in England before he came to the United States. So it was published back somewhere in the late 60s, 1960s. I read it years and years ago, and I guess I'd just forgotten how terrific this chapter on meditation in particular is. And I just recommend it if you haven't read it already. Take a look at it. But we're going over it tonight too. The other reading we're having it's good. It's just not quite as good, I don't think. That's my taste. It's from a book that's been more recently compiled from Trungpa Rinpoche's talks called The Sanity We Are Born With. And this is a more recent publication. Rinpoche himself felt that meditation in action was more conservative than he became later, because he was giving talks in England, and the English were much more conservative than his American audiences, than the audiences he found when he came here in 1970 during the height of the, the counterculture and Vietnam and hippiedom and drugs and LSD and Eastern religion and everything. And it was much more wide and wild, woolly West. And he felt much freer, he said, to talk in America than he had in England, because the English were so conservative, and he felt that he had to tone it down for them. But when I read this talk, it sure doesn't seem like he toned it down to me. He starts by talking about two types of meditation, and really what you have to remember, this was written in the 60s, and Hinduism had come to the West from India and made a big impact. People like Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and Swami Bhaktivedanta and Swami Satchidananda here in the West, and all these guys, Yogi Bhajan, and the Westerners, English and Americans alike, were very taken with Hinduism, which is a form of theism. And they first learned to meditate more, probably, there were more people who learned to meditate as Hindus by far in the Hindu traditions than in the Buddhist. And so Rinpoche felt that he was addressing people who had been studying a theistic religion. And so he, in the beginning of this chapter, he draws the distinction between a theistic and a non-theistic approach. And he talks about how the teachings in a theistic tradition, he doesn't use that word theism, but that's what he's talking about. How these teachings are concerned with the communication with an external deity, a universal concept, God, as opposed to a non-theistic tradition, Buddhism, which is concerned with discovering the nature of existence, reality, as he put it. In both cases, meditation is the only way that you can put these teachings into practice. In the theistic approach, there has to be an I who is going to be the perceiver of God, the Godhead. And so there's a great deal of emphasis on I, and as well as on God, and I is inferior to God, and I would like to be one with God or at the same level as God. So there's this desire to be raised up and to be somehow exalted in some way. And he says of this also that this is an introverted form of meditation, this theistic meditation, because one is constantly focusing inwards on how am I doing, how is my relationship to the deity. And he cites the instance of the prayer of the heart. I remember reading The Way of a Pilgrim. It's about a Russian Orthodox Christian who wanders Russia chanting the prayer from the Caliphilia. It goes, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. It's kind of mantra. And it's very focused inward. He's very focused inward. He's trying to achieve unity with the Godhead. And so he talks a lot about this because there were a lot of people coming who were practicing this kind of meditation and who were very uneducated and didn't know the difference between Buddhism and its very, very different approach. Because with Buddhism, there is no higher or lower. It's irrelevant, higher or lower. And there isn't an inward concentration on the heart or an inward center in Buddhism. Quite the reverse. There's an expanding out. That's why we meditate with our eyes open. That's why we work with the out-breath, going out into the space. Because in Buddhism, what we're doing is we're becoming one with all that is, all of this, all around us. We're bringing our awareness into this. We're not focusing inward in an imaginary place inside. Instead, we're expanding our awareness out into what is not imaginary, everything, the six knowables, as they're called, meaning this objects of the six senses, five senses, and mind, objects of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mental events. And that's what we have to work with. These are arising in space, the space around us. And we are letting our awareness flow out and expand into the space and become one with it, which in fact, what Buddhism teaches is that it is one with the space. The idea of an internal knower, someone in here who knows what's out there, is just that, an idea, which comes and goes. And the reality is that awareness is everywhere. It's all over the place. It's in this striker, it's in this sound, it's in everything, the thoughts that go through one's head. So the techniques in Buddhism are for opening oneself up. He calls it an extrovert form of meditation, as opposed to introvert. The individual and the external world are not separate, but coexist together. So trying to communicate with some external being, God, is simply irrelevant. And nowness plays a huge and important part in Buddhist meditation. And in fact, it's the essence of meditation. Seeing what is without any ambition. You don't need ambition to see what is. What is. It's right here. So you don't need to try to do it better. In fact, trying gets in the way. Here and now, and we use the breathing because a number of reasons. One is it's nothing religious about breathing, so we don't get that added layer of religiosity and sort of philosophy. It's just completely natural. And we can identify with the breathing. That is, it's like a lot of the time we have a watcher who's sitting on our shoulder, kind of, figuratively speaking. And the watcher is saying, now you're doing it, now you're not. That's good, that's bad. I don't like this, I do like that. And meanwhile, you are doing whatever you're doing. You're doing your meditation and the watcher's commenting on it. It's like a judge. And I always think of the watcher as one of those parrots. By the way, if you hear any whistling coming from my end of the transmission here, there's an African gray next door. He talks a blue streak, but he talks in a low voice, so you can't hear him talking, but you can hear him singing. He sings much in a higher octave. So if you hear these chirps and singing, that's that African gray. His name is Max. He's quite a character. So he says opinions have little importance from the Buddhist point of view, especially of meditation. And even philosophy and concepts, they can be helpful, but they can become obstacles. We study the Buddhist teachings for two reasons. One is that they open up your mind to new possibilities. Otherwise, you might just go along constantly thinking you know how things are. But when you read the way Buddhism describes reality, it makes you really change your point of view and opens you up to new possibilities of new ways of seeing. And then finally, the other reason we study is that when you have experiences in meditation, openings, discoveries, suddenly you realize that's what those words meant. And there's this funny connection that is made between the words that you've studied and the experience that you've just had, this opening, this discovery. And it's a feeling of often of wonder that the words which couldn't carry the experience, nonetheless, you can see how they correspond to it. There's this they're not the experience at all, and yet they point to it, something that you had to discover. And it's really a wonder, this connection between these words which don't carry the experience and the actual experience that arises in meditation. And so the Buddhist path is made up of these three wheels: study, meditation, and contemplation. They call these the three wheels of learning. And contemplation is when you bring the ideas that you've learned through your study and you find them in your experience of meditation practice. And it changes the way you see and understand yourself and the world. He says, from the beginning, one tries to transcend concepts, because concepts are just labels. Ideas, philosophy, words are labels. In Tibetan, the word for these concepts is tags, as though you were to take a tag, write the word table on it, and tie it or scotch tape it to the table that you're sitting at. You know, it's a tag. That's what words are. And we can get lost in these tags as though they have real meaning, when in fact, they're just pointing to the experience, and the experience is what's real, the direct experience. And so finally, what Buddhism is about is, through one's study and practice, coming into contact with direct knowledge of the real. Now, in any form of meditation, theistic, non-theistic, one first must overcome a great feeling of demand and ambition. And this is a major obstacle. It creates, it's part and parcel with a feeling of wantingness. And that wantingness says, I'm not there. I want to be there. Maybe if I practice harder, I'll be there. Maybe if I study more, I'll be there. I'll get there. But I'm not there now. That very feeling of not being there is a tremendous obstacle in itself. This wantingness acts as a veil, and it becomes a discovery, an obstacle to the discovery of the moment of now, of nowness. Because wantingness is always based on the future and or the past. So nowness is almost completely forgotten. We have this imaginary idea of what we want. Maybe we had it in the past. We experienced it for a moment, and we can remember that feeling of delight and of shock and of awareness. And so we keep thinking about the past and wanting to recreate it in the future. That's a problem. And that keeps us away from really discovering the real thing, which is always, always, always now. So meditation, when we do this meditation and we sit here and we go out with the breath, and the breath goes out and we become the breath. We give up the watcher, you see, who's sitting on the shoulder. You give that up. And when you give that up, then there's only the breath. That's what it means to become the breath or be one with the breath. Now, if you try and watch yourself and say, am I being one with the breath? Well, you're not. Because then there's two. The one that you're watching and the watcher. Rinpoche used to call the watcher the hitchhiker. And I always envisioned him as a parrot sitting on my shoulder wearing a Keystone Cop hat, saying, "Ah, that's good. Ah, that's bad. Ah, now you're doing it. Ah, now you're not." That kind of thing. So that wantingness is a problem. It acts as a veil. And it becomes an obstacle to discovery, because real discovery only takes place now. And now is happening for us all the time. What an irony. Now in the teachings, they talk a lot about great bliss. Hold on one second. Alexa.
John, you're muted.
Sorry, everybody. I'm trying to get the air conditioner off.
A few things shared in the air conditioning. Which one did you want?
Alexa, stop. We refer to her as she who must not be named. If any of you remember that television series. So this I, this watcher, the hitchhiker, which is also called the ego, is really just a bubble that we carry around from time to time, moment to moment. It's not there all the time. It's there when it's there as a thought, as a mental creation. We try to protect it because it has built in the fear that it doesn't exist, which it doesn't. It's a real fear. So ego is always, always trying to bolster itself, maintain itself, prove that I'm well, I'm good, I'm here, I exist. But it doesn't. And that's where that fear comes from, that wantingness, that feeling of anxiety, is the very fact that ego knows, I know that I don't exist, that I'm going to die in the moment, right now, and then be reborn again, and then die again. But every time we come back into the present moment fully, we just relax into the present, that anxiety, that fear, that wish that things were otherwise goes away. It evaporates. It dissolves into nothingness. The trick is constantly coming back. There's a term in the teachings that's called mahasukha, means great bliss. The first experience of great bliss comes, they say, when one realizes that you are already there, that there is nothing you have to do, that you are not imperfect and need to make yourself perfect, that in fact each one of us is fine just as we are now. And there is tremendous freedom in that realization, freedom from the compulsion to be different, the compulsion to improve oneself or improve oneself, the environment around oneself. We use a technique in meditation. We work with the breath, but even the technique is artificial. You know, we follow the breath out, it dissolves, and then we're here in awareness. We're here in awareness all the time. We don't need the technique. We use the technique. At some point, the technique dissolves, it evaporates, it goes away, because in and itself is a distraction. So in summary about this practice of meditation, it's not centralized inwards, it's out. It's not about longing to become higher, better in some way. It's always about being what is right now. And it's all about becoming completely identified with the here, which is spatial, and the now, which is temporal, momentary. He talks again about there's a famous analogy about technique. We're in the midst of all this space. Now, a person could create a vase, on a potter's wheel in order to enclose space, because space is precious. And now this vase has the space in it. And then you break the vase, and the interior space becomes one with the exterior space. This is an analogy for technique, for using meditation technique. We're trying to be present now by following the breath. Pulls us back from dream. And at the same time, at some point, even the technique itself becomes an obstacle. And we let go of the technique because we realize we are already in the now. Then there's a Q&A in which he says a lot of interesting things about devotion in Buddhism. This is a profound subject. He simply says in Buddhism, devotion is opening. Opening how? Opening to this present moment. Letting go of one's doubt, self-doubt, and simply relaxing, opening, being here. This is the true meaning of devotion. And when one has devotion for a teacher, it's because one has experienced that kind of opening with the teacher interpersonally. When that happens, it's called the meeting of the two minds. It's like two vases are broken and the space commingles. And this is called the meeting of the minds between teacher and disciple. And then true devotion is born. See, devotion, people, especially in the Hindu tradition, that a lot of people were trained in when they came to find Trungpa Rinpoche, they thought devotion meant sort of slavish bowing down at your feet. I remember I was telling somebody last night, we were talking about when Allen Ginsberg met Trungpa Rinpoche, not quite the first time. We had set up this meeting. Rinpoche was in California, and Alan wanted to meet him, and we wanted them to meet because it might make Trungpa Rinpoche more famous, and we were trying to put him on the map. So we arranged this meeting. Rinpoche was staying at a travel lodge, and we had a date set up, and Alan went there, and he was staying in the room with Diana and Kaesong. Kaesong was one of his female students, waiting for Rinpoche, and we were on our way, and Rinpoche said he wanted to stop in a bar, as was his wont. And we said, we're going to be late. And he said, that's okay. And we stopped in the bar. By the time we got there, he either was pretty well loaded or he was pretending to be. And we couldn't tell the difference. Marvin and I, we were his secretaries, kind of. So his room was up on the second floor. And there was a stairs going up to an outside balcony that had this indoor-outdoor green grass kind of plastic carpeting, and it had a wrought iron railing. And as we went up the stairs, Rinpoche said he was too drunk and he wanted us to support him. So he put his arms around our shoulders and we were sort of half carrying him up the stairs. I didn't know if that was an act or it wasn't. And we got up to the top of the stairs and he started running down this balcony, and Marvin and I are trying to keep up. We could see at the end of the balcony that there's this door to his room. The door opens and Alan, the great poet, comes out. And he starts approaching us. And at that moment, one of us tripped and the three of us went sprawling on this green plastic carpeting. And Marvin and I picked Rinpoche up. We were holding him. And at that point, Alan had just gotten there and he bent down and kissed Rinpoche's leather-clad feet. And I'm going, oh no, bad beginning. Because he hated that kind of thing. Came from the Hindu tradition, this thing of, oh, guru. See, this is the false kind of devotion. Please, it's begging. You're begging for something to be given to you from this great personage who's going to give the holy, the humble little you. Something done, and you beg, and maybe you give offerings, that kind of thing. And it has nothing to do with the meeting of the minds, eye level, opening, genuineness. It requires genuineness, courage and genuineness on the part of the student. But Rinpoche just overlooked it and went on from there. I've been writing this up. It was quite an evening. So this is a different concept of devotion. No center exists, only devotion, which is open space. He says then the other kind of devotion, like the kind that Alan was practicing as he bent down and kissed Rinpoche's feet, contains a demand. There's a gift given, but hidden behind that gift is a demand for something in return. Talks about fear, how it's a fear of opening up. It's fear, it's ego's tool to keep ego alive. Because when you open up, ego disappears into awareness. Just total, easy, relaxed, human awareness. There was a question in this Q&A when somebody says, what's the purpose of meditation? He says the whole idea of meditation is to develop a completely different way of dealing with things, where you have no purpose at all. In fact, meditation is dealing with the question of whether or not there is such a thing as purpose. And when one learns a different way of dealing with the situation, one no longer has to have a purpose. One is not on the way to somewhere, or rather, one is on the way and one is also at the destination at the same time. And I'll just tell you a funny story I can't resist. When I first met Trungpa Rinpoche, I had been searching for some kind of spirituality. And we had a very powerful meeting, a connection. It shook me to my roots. It was terrific. And he invited me to come and visit him in his bedroom at any time. Well, his bedroom was the inner sanctum, you know. All of his close students were with him in the bedroom often. His wife was away in England. And so I was very loath to go and meet him in the bedroom. But one day I screwed up my courage. And I went and knocked on the door. I was 25. And what I didn't know was that on the other side of that door, Rinpoche was sitting in bed, maybe naked, maybe half naked, surrounded by some of his students. He had been invited by a local minister, this is up in Barnet, Vermont, to be on one of those Sunday talk shows after the services, you know, the invited guest. And he had accepted the invitation. So the minister, in preparation for this guest, this visit, had sent him a questionnaire to fill out. And Fran Lewis, one of his students, was sitting at the end of the bed reading him the questions. And he was dictating answers. As I knocked on the door, I didn't know it, but the question had just been asked, Franny had just asked, what is the purpose of life? The door swung open. He turns and looks at me over his shoulder like this and answers Franny. But I thought he was just speaking to me. He says, the purpose of life is to have no purpose. If you have a purpose, you just make a nuisance of yourself, to yourself and everyone else. I thought he was talking to me. The door opens, he sees my face, and this is what he says. I just felt like a butterfly pinned to the wall behind me. So here it is, from meditation in action. He says again, meditation is not about trying to develop concentration. Concentration requires a watchman, that's the watcher, to make sure you're doing it properly, which is ego. So shamatha practice is not concerned with concentrating on the breathing. It's being the breath. The breath goes out, dissolves, and then there's just this, a gap. He talks about posture, how important it is, the straight back, so that there's no strain on the breathing. And he talks about it's a matter of trying to become one with the breath. So, in sum, meditation should be natural, spontaneous, not solemn or holy. One should simply try to identify with the breath, that you are the breath as it goes out and dissolves into space, and you dissolve with it. And what it means is that the awareness then is just here in this space, aware of anything and everything, nothing in particular. I remember back around that same time, Rinpoche's closest student was a Brit, a guy named Richard Arthur, wonderful guy. He died this past year. And I really loved him. His name was Kunga Dawa in Tibetan. And one day I walked into a room, and it was a little library. And Kunga was sitting there on the floor on a cushion meditating. And when I saw him, I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you." And he just looked up at me with this big grin and said, "Interrupt me from what?" That's understanding meditation. There are no interruptions. We are here. This is Vipassana meditation, insight meditation. This is the meditation that will take you further and far on the path, all the way to the end. It's the meditation that changes one's understanding of who one is and what the world is. Before we meditate this way, we think, I am, I am, I am, I. And the world is this collection of things out there that I collect, manipulate, get rid of. Which all changes with Vipassana meditation. I and other dissolve. He says, when thoughts arise, just observe them as thoughts. You don't try to get rid of them. You don't treat them as enemies. If you do that, it's just more I. Usually we are lost in dreams. As for example, you're planning your next holiday or vacation. It's almost as though you were on it already, on the trip, and you're not even aware that these are just thoughts. So then you wake up and you see them and you're back. You're not trying to suppress thoughts, but you see their transitory nature and their translucent nature, that you can see right through them. And then he says, do not become involved in any kind of struggle, as for instance, the rejection of thought. It's a waste of time. There should be no deliberate effort to control or to be peaceful. And this technique just grows gradually. The next chapter really is saying mostly the same things again, but in slightly different words, and I don't think it's quite as powerfully. But he does talk about how out of this practice, we begin to develop gentleness towards ourselves because we're giving up self-improvement. And we're beginning to accept whatever we are in the present moment, just as we are. So we can be much more gentle and have sympathy and friendship for ourselves, which we can then extend out to others. I think I'll just stop there. We could have a discussion if you like. Graham.
Hi. I have a question. If there's nothing to do, why do it?
Why not?
And what is the Buddhist view of motivation? And if there is no process over time, and now is all there is, how do we practice the immanence of already being human inside out?
It's a dance. It's an act of lovemaking. It's a constant interplay between everything. And they say of the great yogis that they're constantly playing. It's a play. The term is rolpa in Tibetan. And that there's tremendous love and pleasure. And it's described in terms of clarity, which is prajna, compassion, which really means heart, love, joy as the motivator. And then skillful means the constant skillful dance. You know, one person goes like this with their arms and the other person goes like that. You know, there's a constant interplay back and forth. I mean, it's fun to make love, isn't it? When we all do it. And there's no reason for it. There's no purpose to it. It's not like we're accomplishing something that's, you know, like we're going to keep score maybe and on our refrigerator, how many times we made love. You don't do that. You know, it's just, you do it for its own sake because it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing with helping other people. It's all an act of love. Call it compassion. There's a warmth to it, a heat, and a happiness and a freedom.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, from the moments that we've experienced this, and we all have now and then, beats the heck out of striving.
Yeah, no doubt. I agree with that.
I know what you mean, though, that question.
Well, it's like Shakespeare said, the play's the thing. You know, and if he was in a punster mood, it would mean the play, back and forth, you know, having fun with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Making love. Bringing people into freedom, oneself too. An open space, the dance.
Oh, yeah.
And that this is where great teachers liberate confused beings through this play, through this opening. One day, Rinpoche gave instruction on how to be a meditation teacher. I actually wrote this up in an article years ago for the Shambhala Sun. The article was on group therapy. But in it, I forget why this came up. And what he said was this, he wasn't talking about telling people, you know, how to cross their legs or how to watch their breath or, you know, any of that. He was talking about what it means profoundly to be a meditation teacher. And what he said is that it's a matter of opening between teacher and student. Opening to the real. And if the ground exists, if the communication exists between the teacher and the student, it allows this teacher to open. And you know what it's like when you are with somebody who's very open. You relax, right? You melt a little bit. You feel like you don't have to protect yourself. Watch your words. So the teacher opens to the student. And if the student is ready, the student opens a bit to the teacher. And then the teacher can open a little more. And this might encourage the student to open more yet. Back and forth. He called it lovemaking. He called it diplomacy. It's like an act of diplomacy, you know. He called it a dance. And he said, but at some point, it may happen that the student reaches their limit of how much they can or want to open. And at that point, the teacher has to stop. Because if they don't, they'll turn themselves into a demon. They'll frighten the student. I'd like to read you something from a totally different book. Hold on a sec. And this is, if I have any hesitation, it's because what I'm about to read you is very advanced. But it's here in a book that you can buy on Amazon. This is by Longchenpa. It's a trilogy. This is the first one. It was originally translated many years ago by Herbert Gunther. It was called, for those of you who might remember, if you're old enough, Kindly Bent to Ease Us. Now it's called Finding Rest in the Nature of Mind. It's called the Trilogy of Rest. And it's been translated just recently by the Padmakara Translation Committee. Much better translation. I mean, Herbert Gunther was good, but he was very, very not good too. He was too wordy, too conceptual. But he did a great service because he really understood the philosophy. And this book is by Longchenpa, who most of the Tibetans I've ever known have regarded Longchenpa as the greatest of all the Tibetan teachers. He lived in the 14th century. And he primarily wrote about Dzogchen. In this translator's introduction, see if I can't find this, I'm going to take it as a sign. Maybe it's here. There's a description. Just bear with me for a second. I thought it was really quite extraordinary. You don't see this very often. Because oftentimes the teacher tells the student to keep it secret. Well, you might just have to find this and read it yourself in the translator's introduction. It's veiled. Longchenpa was quite extraordinary. In his most extraordinary works, this is what's called, this particular work, this trilogy of rest, is what's called a Lam Rim text. Lam Rim means stages of the path. And it's generally a Sutrayana, meaning Hinayana, Mahayana, less in the Vajrayana. Longchenpa wrote a lot about the Vajrayana, about Dzogchen, the great perfection. But this book is more about the path leading up to it. Oh, here it is. I guess you are going to hear it. So this book, most of the books that he wrote on Great Perfection, they're restricted, meaning you have to have the permission of a teacher to read them. Although you can buy some of them and read them without permission, although it's not recommended. This book, though, which is quite beautiful, is Sutrayana. It's Hinayana Mahayana, and so it's available. Let's see where to start. Is it okay if I read this?
Yeah.
he says, now in the Nyingma system, there are four main sects of Tibetan Buddhism. Nyingma is one of them. Longchenpa was Nyingma. And in that system, there are 9 stages to the path. They're called the 9 jhanas. The Kagyu system of, I'm both, because Trungpa Rinpoche was born into the Kagyu sect, but then his own root guru was Nyingma. So he brought both of them together. Longchenpa, in the Kagyu system, there are 7 stages to the path. All right? Yes. And here there are 9. So he says, in terms of the 9 vehicles jhana system, the progressively sophisticated views of the first 8 vehicles, from the Shravaka jhana, that's the first one, up to and including the Anu Yoga jhana, that's the 8th one of 9, are the inner tantras, all share a common feature. They are, as philosophical positions, established according to the rational processes of the discursive mind. So all of the teachings of the first 8 jhanas come from the discursive mind. They have to do with logic, reasoning. The 9th, which is the greatest of them, it's called the Great Perfection, Dzogchen, Ati in Sanskrit, transcends the discursive mind. The teachings are explained, analyzed, and understood by ordinary intellectual methods and through the kind of reasoning that, given intelligence, merit, hard work, and perseverance, is open to every human mind in the ordinary sense of that word. The view thereby established, and the view is very important in Buddhism. The view is how you see the world, how you understand who I and the world, what we are, what everything is. The view that is thereby established, whether of sutra or tantra, because this includes tantra, lays the ground for meditative practice and subsequent conduct in the post-meditation situations of daily life. So you study, you practice sitting on your cushion, and you create a view, an understanding of life that you take out into the world. These are the 8 lower vehicles he's talking about. From the views of the lower 8 vehicles, however, that of the Great Perfection, or Ati Yoga, stands apart. For in addition to a particular understanding of the nature of phenomena, both mental and extramental, acquired through study and reflection, a feature it shares with the lower views, the true and authentic view of the Great Perfection consists in the direct recognition of the nature of mind itself. And when this is talking about mind, it's not talking about mind just in here. It's talking about mind everywhere. This recognition is, of course, prepared for by the reception of teachings on the view in the usual way, and by assiduous aspirational practice. Nevertheless, the actual view of the Great Perfection to which these teachings relate only indirectly, in the manner of a finger pointing at the moon. That's what these teachings are like. They're like the finger that's pointing at the moon, but then you have to look at the moon to see the real moon. To use the traditional image. So, nevertheless, the actual view of the Great Perfection to which these teachings relate only indirectly, in the manner of a finger pointing at the moon, to use the traditional image, is not something arrived at simply through the exercise of reason or ordinary intelligence, however well informed or acute that intelligence may be. Can't get there that way. The nature of the mind, the pure state of awareness, which in the terminology of the Great Perfection is referred to as Rigpa. The Sanskrit for that is Vidya. Rigpa is the Tibetan. Is said to lie outside the range of the discursive intellect. As the very nature of the mind, it is indeed that which makes all intellection possible. It's here all the time. It's what allows us to hear these words, see these sights, that you can't shut it off. It's the constant knowingness that is part of our very human nature. As the very nature of mind, it is indeed that which makes all intellection possible, all thoughts. It underlies and logically precedes every state of ordinary cognition. And for that reason, it can never itself become the object of such cognition, just as you can't see your own eyes. This is why the authentic view of the great perfection, the recognition of the nature of the mind, transcends every kind of theory, philosophical position, or doctrinal tenet. It cannot be described or explained. It cannot be taught. It can, however, be pointed out and recognized when a qualified master encounters a disciple who, through training and vast reserves of merit, has achieved the necessary level of receptivity. When this occurs, it happens quite naturally in an intimate human relationship where the blessing powers of the master's own realization make contact with the complete openness of the disciple, a state of pure and perfect confidence in the master and the teachings that, for want of a better word in English, has been described as devotion. This extraordinary event in which the nature of the mind is pointed out and recognized may take place in any number of situations that, to an outside observer, might well seem completely ordinary and mundane. There was, for instance, nothing particularly unusual in the appearance of the stars in the evening sky above the hillside where Patrul Rinpoche and his disciple, Nyoshul Lungtok, were lying. There was nothing out of the ordinary in the sound of the dogs barking down below in the Dzogchen monastery. And yet such was the receptivity and readiness of Nyoshul Lungtok, the fruit of his merit and the purification of his mind stream, that's traditional language, that in that peaceful exchange when Patrul Rinpoche said, that is the meditation, Nyoshul Lungtok understood what his master meant and entered into the same direct vision of the nature of the mind that Patrul Rinpoche was himself experiencing. Not that such introductions are always so serene. Hardly. Patrul Rinpoche had himself received a very different pointing out instruction from his teacher, Do Khyentse, who grabbed him by the hair, threw him to the ground, and gave him a severe thrashing, insulting him and calling him an old dog. That's the way he got it. But as Tulku Tunduk explains, Tulku Tunduk is a modern day teacher. You can read his books. He's a wonderful guy. But as Tulku Tunduk explains, the end result was the same. At that moment, Patrul realized the unhindered intrinsic awareness, clear like the cloudless sky. I'll just read a touch more here. It follows from this that one may without absurdity claim to be a follower and aspiring practitioner of the great perfection in the sense of receiving teachings from a qualified master of that tradition, and in trying the best one can to implement them. Nevertheless, to say that one possesses the view of the great perfection, is therefore a genuine and qualified practitioner of that tradition, is to make a very considerable claim, one that, in a traditional setting, few, even among the most erudite and experienced, would ever dream of making. The great 20th century master Khenpo Jigme Phuntsok, the founder of Larung Gar in Golok, and in his day one of the greatest living authorities on the writings of Longchenpa, is on record as saying that even the word Dzogchen was something he hardly dared even to pronounce. I'm going to stop with that.
Thank you.
You don't find that description very often. For reasons he explained. That story about Patrul Rinpoche and Nyosho Lungtok is famous. But there's so many of them. You know, there's the story of Naropa and Talopa. Naropa follows Talopa for years. And finally, one day, after enduring many hardships, Talopa takes off his sandal and slaps Naropa in the face with it. And that's the transmission. Hope I didn't go too far reading that. It just knocked me out when I read it.
Very good.
No.
Yeah. I once asked Trungpa Rinpoche facetiously if he could name the Babe Ruth of Tibetan Buddhism. And without any hesitation, he said Longchenpa. That was very sacrilegious of me when I was young and foolish. But he didn't care. He just said Longchenpa. He only lived for 57 years. Accomplished an extraordinary amount at that time. There's some texts that he wrote that are called the Seven Treasuries, that are the ultimate teachings on Dzogchen. The Seven Precious Treasuries.
John, I'm rereading Longchenpa's Precious Treasury of Empty Space.
Yeah.
It's short, maybe 20
Chiying Sud,
pages.
the treasury of the Chiying Sud, the treasury of the Dharma Dhatu.
It's unbelievable.
It is.
Just transports you. It's just incredible.
It is. It's the ultimate statement I think I've ever seen in words. That particular treasury. Everybody recognizes it as being the greatest of them all. It's called the Treasury of Empty Space is one translation. The word is Chiying in Tibetan, which is translated as Dharma Dhatu in Sanskrit. And it means the space of phenomena. So it's the treasury of this space that we inhabit that is filled with the phenomena that are arising and passing away instantaneously in the present moment. That's the Chiying. And Sud, Rinpoche Sud, Rinpoche means precious and Sud means treasury. And it's one of the great pieces of Buddhist literature. Maybe many people feel the greatest. Yeah, and you can buy it and read it. It's amazing. Although if you're working with a teacher, they'll restrict it. Meaning you can't give it to anybody else. You can't say what's in it, except to people who were there at the teaching. Samaya, it's called Samaya Oaths. Jigme Punsuk, who he references there, was a great teacher. He died in, early 2000s. And at the time of his death, he was probably the greatest living Tibetan teacher. He's the one who said that he hardly dared to speak the word Dzogchen. And he was a great authority on Longchenpa. Thanks,
Yeah.
Cliff. There are teachers who are teaching it. These days. Anybody else? Afraid I said
Thank
something.
you. Thank you very much.
Tony, any thoughts?
Not tonight. Thank you, John. That's powerful. Thank you.
Thank you. Leanne? It's a beautiful path we're on. It's really, as far as I'm concerned, the only way to prepare for death. And many of us in this little room are getting close. They say that the only way to go into death is completely wide awake, aware in the present moment. That's what the teachings all tell you. That's the way to do it. So we should be practicing so that we can die well, not die in fear. Fear is the enemy. Fear and wishing things were otherwise is the great enemy. I've got a lot of friends dying. That's what happens when you get to 75. It's amazing. Rinpoche, one time he was alive and he looked out at us. He was giving a talk on death or something. And he said, "You'll be dropping like flies." And I'll tell
John,
you, it feels that way.
Are we going to have to start offering long life prayers for you now? Please, John, stay with us,
Oh,
precious
yeah.
one. Please stay. Do not leave us.
That would just boost my ego. You don't do that. It'd be a terrible thing to do for me.
We'll challenge you with it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I did like, it's a tough one for some people, the idea that there is no purpose to life or meaning to life also. And it seems at first to be a rather discouraging, depressing kind of a thing. But when I sit in that and rest in it, it's just so liberating and freeing and allows things just to unfold on their own. And it just gets everything spinning as exactly as it should. It's a really interesting perspective on things, or a view, as you would call it. And then the other question is who's there to have the purpose? So.
And yet, I fall back into those habits again and again.
So you're locked into everywhere. At that point, you're locked into everywhere. You're locked into openness. There's no escape. So I hope you don't have agoraphobia at that point, or one doesn't have agoraphobia at that point. That would be a manifestation of the fear of openness. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I like the idea that Rigpa is the essential being, capital B, that beings with a small b are made from.
Yeah.
You know, the particular beings.
Thank you, Graham.
Or perhaps, as the Buddha said, that how is it that a bodhisattva can liberate all sentient beings? And the answer was, There are no sentient beings.
That's good. I like that. There are no sentient beings.
And they'll all be dropping like flies any minute.
Yeah.
So what is that? I don't know.
Strange times we're in, huh?
Yeah.
But beautiful.
So let's see. We have morning meditation if anybody wants to join. Some of the people here come to it. And tomorrow we meet at 8 for 15 minutes of conversation. People like to socialize. We start practicing at 8:15. We go to 9:15, Monday through Thursday. And that includes 10 minutes of walking and 10 minutes of Tonglen towards the end, walking in the middle. And then on Friday through Sunday, we start an hour later at 9. And it's great. It's a lot of fun. Afterwards, people hang out and chat and talk and do all kinds of things, commiserate about the pandemic and Black Lives Matter and whatever else they want to talk about. And fun. And then yesterday, actually, Peter Goldfarb, who's a member, after the meditation, read poems, poetry by Trungpa Rinpoche. He read about, I don't know, 6 or 7 poems. And he's an actor, so he gave them that kind of an actor's performance. And we have different things that go on. It's fun. What else? If you can make a donation to New York Buddha Dharma, it would be appreciated. We pay our web designer and for Zoom and a couple of other things. And I can't think of anything else. Anybody want to bring anything up? There's a yin twin that's going to take place. Yeah, Leon. Yeah.
So you're going to start next week with a new syllabus or a new
Yes,
program?
I'm going to send out the new syllabus.
Okay.
And I'll send it out tomorrow.
All right.
I'll have it.
Just
Anybody
send-
gave me their email down
Okay.
here in the chat. I've got 9 emails. So there's somebody who doesn't want it, but that's okay.
well, you have mine, but I'm going to put it in anyway.
Huh?
You have my email, but I'm going to put it in here anyway.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if you would, just because it'll remind me to send it to you.
Okay.
How do you put things in chat, John?
Tony, I've got your
Yep.
email and I'm just making a note of your name.
Yeah.
So, but the way you do it is somewhere on your screen, there's a little picture of like a speaker's bubble and it says chat underneath it. And you click on that and then you select the person you want to put it to, me or anybody, it doesn't matter, I'll get it. And you type in what you want.
Okay. Thanks.
I've got you. Anybody else want me to just take their name? Okay. Well, folks, should we say the closing chants?
Yeah.
This is the dedication of merit, which we say is good bodhisattvas. Someday we'll do that. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Wonderful to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you, John. Thanks again. See you tomorrow.
Thank
And
you.
especially you, Roberta. I haven't seen you in years.
She's been hanging out here with me quietly.
Oh, hiding.
Energy to come on camera now.
Thank you for showing up.
Great to be here. Thank you, John.
Wonderful to see you.
Hi, Amelia. I see you every morning.
Yeah, bye.
And you see Val,
See
see
you tomorrow.
Cheryl.
No, no, right here. Yeah, Val. Yep.
Hi.
And
I'm
Tim.
not uncloaking.
And Cheryl.
Okay.
I'm here, but
Okay.
I cloaked.
That's okay. We'll
I
You
didn't
go-
want to disturb anyone.
Okay.